clinical social worker, and I work with both male and female survivors of sexual abuse. I'm fairly conventional psychodynamically, but as the years have gone on, I've added more and more other techniques, many Ericksonian techniques and Gestalt, etc. So the language that I use to describe this experience may also be quite conventional. I'm also a survivor myself. What I knew before this intervention with David was that I had been molested the summers when I was 3.5, 4.5, and 5.5, and that I had not seen the man since then. I did return to the place where this occurred and took some photographs. So I have childhood photographs available to me and also later ones. It's been about 9 months since this intervention, and I've had a bit of time to get some distance on it. What I notice is that it starts slowly, and that's because almost as soon as I go into trance, I dissociate. And the experience of being dissociated was pretty averbal, that it was very difficult for me to marry words to the experience. Therefore, that there are lots of silence and it doesn't sound very rich. But I think that what you may notice is that I dip down into the dissociation and come back up with metaphors, bring metaphors to the surface like that. Even though at some points I was so dissociated that I couldn't feel my body and I wasn't aware of having any consciousness, I wasn't aware of a sense of time, there was still floating above this an observing ego, which was doing a running commentary on how I looked to the cameras, what I thought of David's interventions, what I thought of the experience. So I never completely dissociated from the place where I was, but I was able to essentially split myself in two, one part which was the observing ego and the other part which was total dissociation. Okay, since first grade I've always felt a little bit off, say the wrong things to people, and sometimes I've been gray depressed and sometimes black depressed, and I always was looking for the answer for this, trying to understand it, and last spring I got the answer, and of course I was abused as a preschooler, but I still feel that way. And then when I was in Boston, we started this process, and I got into the blackness a little bit, and I want to know how the story ends.
And so what would you like to have happen when you have blackness and you want to know how the story ends?
I want to go in there and I want to live it.
And you want to go in there and you want to live it.
Yeah.
And when you want to go in there, whereabouts in there is there when you want to go in there?
It's all through me here.
And it's all through you there. And is it all through you on the inside or on the outside?
On the inside. On
the inside. And when it's all through you there on the inside, and does it have a shape or a size?
It's the shape of me and the size of me.
And it's the shape of you and the size of you.
Yeah.
And is there anything else about it?
It's black.
And it's black. And black like what?
Black like dark and black like velvet.
And black like dark and black like velvet. And is there anything else about black like dark and black like velvet?
I can just go into it till there aren't any words.
And you can just go into it until there aren't any words. And as you can just go into it until there aren't any words.
It's hard to breathe.
And it's hard to breathe. And as it's hard to breathe, and you can just go into it until there aren't any words. And it's hard to breathe. And when it's hard to breathe, and what happens next when it's hard to breathe?
I breathe very quietly and it hurts right here.
And and it hurts right there, and you can breathe very quietly. And when it hurts right there, what's that like when it hurts right there?
Feels like a round gray ball.
And like a round gray ball. And what kind of round gray ball?
It looks sort of fuzzy.
And fuzzy like what?
Maybe like that little animal curled up.
Like a fat little animal curled up. And what kind of fat little animal curled up could that animal be?
Could be a ferret or a weasel.
And it could be a ferret or a weasel. And what could a fat little furry animal curled up that could be a ferret or a weasel like to do?
It would like to uncurl, and it would like to run around, and it would like to bite.
And could it begin to uncurl?
Yep.
And as it begins to uncurl, and can it begin to run around?
Well, no, I don't want it to bite me.
And you don't want it to bite you, and it wants to uncurl and run around. And can it uncurl and begin to run around?
It could uncurl and run around and bite, but I don't want it to run around and bite inside me.
And it could uncurl and run around and bite, and you don't want it to bite. And what does it want to do when you don't want it to bite?
Well, it's mine, and it doesn't want to bite me, and it could come up and lick my face.
And could it uncurl, and it's yours, and run around, and come up and lick your face?
Yes.
And does it like to lick your face?
Yes, it likes me.
And it likes you. And do you like it to lick your face?
Yes, yes.
And as it licks your face, what would it like to do next?
My hands want to come up and hold it and pat it because it's soft and furry.
And can hands do that?
Yes.
And as hands do that, and it's soft and furry, and would it like to lick your face some more? And hands can come up and hold it. And it's so much different to have soft and furry, outside licking face, and hands can come up and hold it. And it doesn't have to be curled up inside. And it's yours. And what would it like to do after it's licked your face and after you have held it with hands?
Could fall asleep.
Could fall asleep. And can it fall asleep? And as it falls asleep, and how long does it fall asleep for?
I don't know, but it's going to be mine forever. So here we have the first metaphor. What's interesting is when the metaphor is inside my body, it's toxic. It's fused with the perpetrator, and it has all the dangerous and harmful qualities of the abuse of the perpetrator. When the animal comes outside of my body, it becomes separated and it's no longer fused, and it's able to be more benign, it's able to be comforting and loving. And I think it's interesting to see how a metaphor transforms by itself as it exits the body.
And as it falls asleep and is going to be yours forever. And what happens next?
I don't know. I feel better, but I still can't breathe.
And you feel better, but you still can't breathe. And as it falls asleep and you feel better, and you still can't breathe, and black velvet. And then what happens?
I just feel suspended and like there isn't any time when I'm just suspended.
And take all the time.
And it's always there.
To feel suspended. And all the time to feel suspended. Like it's always there. And how long will you feel suspended for? And what happens after all that time? And after you feel suspended? And take some time to discover about that. And about what can happen after all that time is suspended. And take some time to discover that. And all that time. And feel suspended. And that's what happened. And that's what happened.
I died.
And he died.
I died.
And you died.
That's all it is.
That's all there is. And you die. And as you die, and that's all there is, and you die. And how long do you die for? And what happens next after you die? And you die. And you die.
When are people going to understand and stop doing things like that?
And you die. And people don't understand and don't stop doing things like that.
Now that intervention was brilliant to me. That's what turned the whole thing around, made it happen. I thought that you were going to have to end everything, get me out of trance, or that you would end up with somebody catatonic who wasn't going to be able to talk to you. And when you said, what happens next after you die, everything just opened up for me.
Well, that part of the intervention is always a white knuckler for me because I found that in order to value the child's experience, which they are frozen that moment of time, they're always going to die, and so I want to grow time forward. So what happens after you die, they get reborn in T+1 on the other side of time. Then you have access to the child and to the experience. I've often wondered, am I setting up suicidal ideation here by making those comments? And I think the difference is this, that in asking those questions, it reaches inside and speaks to the child's condition. So I would not use that intervention out here cognitively as we're talking now, because that could set up post-hypnotic suggestions.
Good point. What's so fantastic is that the child knows if there's T+1, if she can come out of this state, then there was also T-1 and she can remember what brought her into it. And that is what does it.
Okay, so let's see what happens next.
Okay.
And you die. And people don't understand and don't stop doing things like that.
I could just explain. Nobody would do anything like that.
And so what happens next?
If I could understand, and if I could explain, then he wouldn't do that.
And when you want to understand, and when you want to explain, whereabouts do you want to understand? When you want to understand.
I want to understand here. And if I wasn't suspended in the black, I could.
And you
I
want,
could put words to it.
and you want to understand there. And when you want to understand there, whereabouts there is there? When you want to understand there.
Right in here, back of my eyes.
And right in there, in the back of your eyes. And when you want to understand there, and right in there in the back of your eyes. And does that have a shape or a size? When it's right in there, at the back of your eyes.
It's good. Sorry, it doesn't have words yet.
And it doesn't have words yet.
It's real flat, and it's like, from my eyes forward, is out into space. It's like a not a precipice, but it goes forward into forever.
And it's real flat, and it goes forward into forever. And what kind of flat is that flat? And what could that real flat be made of?
I don't know, but what I want to say is it's my blood.
And it's your blood. And where would your blood that goes on real flat forever, and where would your blood like to go, and what would it like to do?
I would like to be able to paint pictures with my blood, and I would like to be able to put my blood in pens. I would like to be able to write with my blood. What people
And
do.
you'd like to be able to write with your blood. And which part of your blood that's flat would like to be able to paint pictures first? And which part of your blood would like to be able to write with pens? And which part of your blood would like to tell the story of what people do? And which part of your blood would like to tell that story first?
All of it.
So far, he's scooped down into the dissociation, and he's gotten an animal out of it, and he's gotten some black velvet out of it, and he's gotten some blood out of it. In a moment, he's going to make those metaphors interact, and it's in the interaction of the metaphors that the child relives the story. And I knew exactly what had happened. I knew every nuance of it. I knew it with my whole soul, even though I didn't have visual images of everything. The visual images that I think I probably still have back there were encoded in the metaphors. And so that they carried both the information and the emotion, the affect that I had experienced and not had words for or been able to express back then. Those images have a vividness, a life of their own that's indescribable. They're eerie. They have the intensity of dream images or of the images that float into your consciousness when you're meditating or in a trance state or in another hypnagogic state. But what's different is that they have a constancy to them, that unlike dreams, they haven't faded. In the months since this has happened, they still are just as compelling and just as vivid, and I remember them in as much visual detail as I did when I experienced them. And I experienced them with terror and anguish and delight in their beauty.
And blood that goes on forever, or blood that is mere eyes? And would blood be interested in going to black and velvet? And what could blood do if blood could go to black and velvet?
Can paint on velvet.
And black could paint on velvet. And blood could paint on velvet. And what could be the first thing that blood would like to paint on velvet?
A shroud to put over his grave.
A shroud to put over his grave. And can blood paint just the right kind of shroud that needs to be put over his grave?
And say, Jesse, now listen. You didn't know then. Know now.
Can blood paint a shroud that says, Jesse, now listen. You didn't know then. And can blood paint a picture of a shroud that says, now Jesse, listen. And can blood paint that shroud? And as blood paints that shroud, and can that shroud go over Jesse's grave?
The people who come.
And the people who come
put flowers on the grave can read it. You can't read, but
and the people who come can put flowers over his grave and can read it, and some can't read it.
But the skeleton, he's dead now, so he can't read it.
And he can't read it.
But the people who come to put flowers on his grave can read it.
And they can read it. And people who come to put flowers on his grave, they can read it. and a shroud.
And maybe one person will understand and won't do it.
And maybe one person will understand and would shroud with blood, like to do anything else.
Or wrap me too, because I'm dead too.
And shroud would like to wrap you too, because you're dead too. And as shroud begins to wrap you, because you're dead too, and blood, your blood is on shroud. And what can happen when shroud wraps you too?
When it's on me, there are not words on it, but there's like red embroidered flowers around the top.
And when shroud is on you, there are red embroidered flowers on the top. And what happens to red embroidered flowers on the top?
I don't know. I just remember Jeese gave me flowers.
And Jeese gave you flowers.
Oh, I've got such a headache.
And when you've got such a headache, whereabouts is headache?
Right in the front of sinuses.
When it's right in the front in your sinuses. And does it have a shape or a size? It's right in the front of sinuses. Have to value all the symptoms.
This is not a metaphorical headache. This is a real headache. Oh, jeez.
That's funny. That's cute. That reminds me of when I'm working with teenagers and I try and interpret a piece of their acting out, and they deny my interpretation. But the symptom does carry meaning. The symptom is a metaphor for the conflict, and it is a metaphor for both sides of the ambivalence. Whether people deny it or not, it's true.
And so when it's a real headache, and it's right in the front,
Oh, it's just...
and what's it like when it's right in the front?
It's up here above my eyes, and it's not so bad.
And
Got
it's
quieter.
above your eyes, and it's not so bad and got quieter. And when it's above your eyes,
I think the headache's there when there's a fight going on. Because I want to write those words and put them on his grave, and yet I want to keep the flowers. And shouldn't I be... Oh. Shouldn't I be putting the flowers on his grave too?
and there's a fight going on, and a headache. And what does a headache want to do?
A headache's the noise that a fight makes, and so I can't have a fight without noise.
And you can't have a fight without noise. And would headache, that's the noise, be interested in going to a grave of Jeese's? And what would a headache that was noise of a fight do? When shouldn't you be putting flowers on a grave? And what would the noise of a fight do on a grave and a shroud and blood and flowers?
The louder the noise, the more people would come.
The louder the noise, the more people would come to that grave. And the more people that come to that grave, the more people would
Here.
hear. Jeese.
I don't want them to know because he gave me flowers. I mean, I want them to know because I want them to understand and to stop. But I don't want them to know because he gave me flowers, and then they'll think, how could he give her flowers and do that? And then
And
how could
he did both. He did that. And he gave you flowers. And he did both. And people will need to understand that people like Jeese do both. People like Jeese do that. And people like Jeese give flowers. And a headache needs to make a lot of noise so that people will know that people like Jeese do that. And they give flowers. That's what people need to know. People need to know what blood knows. And blood knows that a shroud has both parts. That's what blood knows. That's right.
foxgloves, snapdragons, poppies, and cocks.
And foxglove, and poppies, and snapdragons, and cocks.
That's not right. That's not right.
And that's not right. And Jeese gives flowers. And it's not right.
Not right.
And it's not right.
Little girls shouldn't have to do that.
And they shouldn't have to do that. And people need to know that Jeese did that. And Jeese gave flowers. And it's not right. And a headache and noise has been waiting to let people know
Jeannie had to give in.
that she had to give in. That Jeannie
Had to give head.
and Jeannie had to give head. And Jeannie, and it's not right. And Jeese gave heads of flowers. And Jeannie had to give head to Jeese. And it's not right. And blood knows, and headache knows, and flower heads know. Take a little time to know about about flowers and headache, and what Jeannie had to do to give head, and it's not right, and what can happen, and what can blood do, what can headache do, and flowers, poppies, snapdragon, cocks. Take some time to know about what can happen next.
I like to mark this because it's important and it figures later on. But those flowers, which have represented my childhood affection for this man and the nice things he did for me and some of the actual things we did together while we were gardening, have become sexualized. And each particular flower that I name represents a very specific sexual act and carries the affect of fear and shame and disgust that belong to that particular sexual act.
And so what do you think you discovered?
How much passion was back then?
And how much passion was back then, and blood and roses.
And how much I loved him. And how I'll weave a shroud out of my blood.
And how much passion, and how much you loved him. And how you weaved a shroud out of your blood.
It feels real good to be understood. Real good.
And how do you know that you're understood?
Because you describe it right. When you were talking, it was like as if that was a melody that I had already known before, and I was listening to your words and saying, yes, that's the way the notes go. But when you already know a melody, you know which notes come next, even though you can't read music. But you know it goes up or down, and when you were saying these things about ambivalence, I already knew what you were going to say because it matched the score, you know? It was like you and I were reading the same score, and that's how I knew I was understood. Do you know what I mean?
No. But you know what you mean.
If you have music, you can have music printed twice.
Okay.
And you have the music and you were reading it, and you were explaining the ambivalence in the shroud. Okay. But I had the score too, so that's how I knew I was understood, because you were saying the same things that was on my score.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
All right. And I got my score from other people who had similar
scores, yeah.
Scores in music.
What happened for you when you said, no, I don't understand, but you do?
Well, I was concentrating on a few other things at that time, and I couldn't quite figure out what you meant. And the thing that threw me is at the end of it when you said, do you know what I mean? And I thought, well, are you in trance or you're not? So I figured it was time to discuss it more cognitively. And I felt if I had said yes, that you would have sensed in some way that I was incongruent with that. So I thought no, and then when I said the other statement, I was trying to reflect it back into you, and I wished I never said that now.
Okay, I can help clarify that, because I was in trance and I wasn't. The 50-year-old part of me wasn't. I was right here with you. And I'd gone to graduate school and I had all the vocabulary and everything. But I was split, and there was still a 5-year-old sitting there in the room. And the 5-year-old sort of could understand the words, but didn't have them at her command. And that's why I wasn't speaking on a cognitive level. I was still speaking in metaphor. So that explains that, huh?
And so that's why I got lost, and I thought, well, I'll say no and
Yeah,
wait and see
yeah,
what happens.
yeah.
So what happened then?
The 50-year-old was saying, of course he doesn't know what my experience is. He's in his head and I'm in my head. But the 5-year-old was saying, oh, I told Mommy, and she says she doesn't know what I'm talking about. What am I going to do now? It was that kind of startled experience that left me wary, but I gave you another chance.
Okay.
It's funny, when you ask those questions, how will you know you've got what you wanted to get? And I wrote down, I will know my name. And I think that I said my name.
And you will know your name. And what is your name?
Jeannie.
And your name is Jeannie. And Jeannie had to give Jesse head. And Jesse gave Jeannie flowers, foxgloves,
Snapdragons.
poppies,
And more.
and more.
Yeah.
And that was Jeannie. And Jeannie got flowers. And Jeannie had to give Jesse head. And Jesse died. And Jeannie wanted other people to know so that other people didn't do that.
Jeannie died inside first.
And Jeannie died inside first. And Shroud and Velvet had to go around Jeannie. And when Shroud and Velvet and blood went around Jeannie, then Jeannie could come alive from out of the flowers. And Jesse is dead. And Jeannie knows her name. And that's Jeannie. And how old is Jeannie when Jeannie's Jeannie?
Very young.
Very young.
Very young.
And she's very young. And what can Jeannie be wearing when Jeannie's very young?
It doesn't much matter.
I don't know whether you realized it at the time, but you used some words that I didn't. And what's really interesting is that that was a problem for me, so it proves the point that as long as you use my own words, everything goes smoothly. But when you introduce an interpretation into it, it flubs things up. You did a couple of other times, and I was able to ignore it because it wasn't at a crucial point in the metaphors. But when you said Jeannie comes alive out of the flowers, unfortunately, the flowers at that point were totally gross sexual acts in my metaphoric scheme.
Oh, I see. I thought those were going to be healing, so I was looking at these as being very protective and something wonderful that it was a metaphor from the past, and those would continue to grow. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would have liked to have it that way, but it wasn't. They were gross, specific sexual acts. So what I interpreted your healing remark as being was you liked that. You came alive out of that. You enjoyed that. And at that moment, you became the perpetrator in my mind, and I slammed the door shut against you. And internally, I made the decision of, you can't trust grown-ups, and I'm going to have to raise myself. Too bad. Tough luck. when you look at the interventions, from now on I'm curt with you. I give you yes/no answers. I often don't answer your questions. The metaphors lead me, not your words. So you've lost the 5-year-old. That's
So
a shame, huh?
I had my chance and I've blown it yet again. Huh?
Yeah.
It's really difficult trying to keep track of the perspectives because you have such little words or information to go with. And so I think I lost it there. I got caught up in the metaphor and the possibilities of what flowers could do.
Inherent in the metaphor.
Right.
I'm amazed you can do it at all. I'm amazed that your memory's that good and that you can actually hear me, because sometimes my words are very cloaked over with affect, and I don't see how you can do it.
I did feel it changed very significantly here, but I had no idea what had happened and what had changed, because the rest of this part of the interview...
Quite different. So now we both know, huh?
Yeah.
Great.
Right. What can Jeannie be wearing when Jeannie's very young?
It doesn't much matter.
It doesn't much matter.
It's fine.
But she's very young.
Yeah.
And she's fine. And would Jeannie like to do anything else when she's very young and it's fine?
Well, I got this little animal I have to take care of. And I'd like a home, and I'd like somebody to take care of me, because if I don't have Jeese and I don't have anybody, I'm not going to be able to take care of this little animal very well, you know. I'd like someday to have a home. It would have been nice if I could have had a home when I was 5, but it didn't work out that way, and I don't want to make my home among strangers. But there's come a day when I don't have to live among strangers. Like, I don't have to have people living in my house, but there are people that I care about, that care about me, and that love me. And that's a home, isn't it?
And that's a home. And that's a home. And would a furry animal like a home like that?
This home's always had plenty of room for animals. It's had kitty cats and dogs and guinea pigs and lizards and snakes and goldfish and I forget what else. And there's always room for one more animal in this home.
And there's always room. And with that animal like a room in that home.
Hey, animal, wake up. It's safe now. Yeah, it wouldn't mind at all. It would like to go out in the garden sometimes, and that would be okay.
And that'd be okay. And does Jeannie need anything else?
Jeannie needs to quit worrying so much about things.
And Jeannie...
Because if you can write or paint the truth with your life's depression and your life's blood, it's redeemed.
And can Jeannie write her life story with her life's blood? And can Jeannie write? And can Jeannie paint her story? And can Jeannie be redeemed?
We don't know, but we've got 20 or 30 years to find out, and that's just fine.
And that's
just fine.
And to write and to paint with blood her life story, and to be redeemed, And how different that is.
In a home with a family.
And an animal. And does Jeannie like that?
It's the beginning.
It's the beginning. And it's the beginning. And it's the beginning. And does Jeannie need anything else?
I don't know. But what I imagine is that if it's just the beginning, that things I need could be found along the way. That I don't need them now, but that I can go and find them.
And that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
And is Jeannie all right with that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Jeannie's all right with that. And does Jeannie need anything else? Knowing that it's just the beginning. Hello.
Hi.
You're back. She's all right.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's much better to be at the beginning than to be at a head, isn't it?
At the end.
At the end.
At the end of your life when you're 5. This is better.
That's right. You get what you wanted?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that?
I know my name.
You know your name. And you know your name.
And I'm going to use it, too.
And you are going to use
Yep.
it. And what have you been using instead of that name?
Sometimes I use Jean. Sometimes I thought of changing my name. I even thought of changing it to Jessie. I'm glad I didn't. Can you imagine?
We can imagine how that would be possible and what sense that would make. Because of the passion in the name of Jeese. But what sweet music there is in Jeannie. You know your name. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you.
Now, on the second day, I thought things had gone reasonably all right, but as we'll see shortly, you started crying and you were grieving, and I'm thinking, oh no, what have I done wrong this time?
Oh, he didn't do anything wrong. Nothing wrong at all. You see, you had enabled me to access that grief that had been repressed all these years. And grief is a precious, precious gift because it allows you to start the process of resolution of an experience, letting go, saying goodbye to my first love. Yeah, it was a beautiful thing to be able to grieve. I think that when we're watching this, I'd like people to note that since I'm grieving, the experience is over. And I'm no longer the 5-year-old reliving the experience. I'm shifting at different ages, and I'm remembering the experience that I've lost.
And so what's happened?
Well, first thing I did was I called a friend who's part of my family, woke him up, but that was okay. Don't remember any dreams. Slept okay, woke up, bathed in grief. I've been crying all day, grieving.
And so you're grieving.
Oh, yeah.
And as you're grieving, and how long does grieving last for?
In my experience, it's about 2 years.
About 2 years. And so grieving can grieve for 2 years. And as you're grieving, and bathed in tears, and grieving, and a shroud, and flowers, and and grieving. And what would grieving like to have happen? And what would grieving like to do?
I want him back.
And you want him back. And you want him back. And you want him back. And grieving. And when you're grieving and you want him back, whereabouts do you want him back?
I want him back in my life, but he's dead.
You want him back in your life, but he's dead.
I just didn't want him dead.
And you didn't want him dead. And when you didn't want him dead,
I never wished him dead.
and when you never wished him dead, how do you know you never wished him dead?
Because I love him.
And you loved him. So I'm trying to get the first clue to a metaphor. And you loved him. And when you loved him, where did you love him? When you loved him.
It's not right, but I loved him all the ways a woman loves a man.
And you loved him all the ways a woman loves a man.
Couldn't take my eyes off of him.
And you
I wanted to stay with him. My heart was his. My body was his.
Your heart was his and your body was his.
The way a woman's body is.
And the way a woman's body is. And when you loved him, the way a woman's body loved him. Your heart was his, your body was his. And when you loved him like that, loved him. And whereabouts did you love them? When you loved him like that, loved him.
The garden.
And the garden. And whereabouts in the garden?
Down by the edge of the lake.
And down by the edge of the lake.
Where the peas were planted, I know.
And where the peas were planted. And you loved him where the peas were planted. Down by the edge of the lake and in the garden.
I can see it. I can see the wall. The stone wall went up to the kitchen, and I can see how if a person was looking out the kitchen window, you couldn't see anything, because that's what people do when they're making love. They lie down between the rows in the garden so nobody can see them from the house. And it's furtive that you take off your clothes and you make love, and it's...
And that's what people do.
When they love.
When they love.
When they
and
love.
it's furtive. And it's furtive. Between the rose and the peas. At the edge of the lake. In the garden. And that's what people do when they make love.
And now I see myself in my own home now, standing next to my bed. I've got a double bed with black railings, and it's empty. And I've got the shawl around me with the red roses. And there's no one to be in my bed, and there's no... I will never love him the way I couldn't even grow up to love.
And
We were separated, and then he died.
And
It's not
there's
right.
no one to be in your bed. And you can never love anyone like you loved him. And you loved him like a woman loves, with your whole heart and your whole body. And you loved him between the rows of the peas. And you loved him furtively. And you loved him in the garden by the lake. And you can't see from out of the kitchen window. And you loved him. And you had nobody to love in your big bed with the railing. And you can love no one like you loved him. Jeese, Jeese, oh Jeese, why did you have to do it? And you loved him, and your blood wrote on his shroud, and your blood loved him, and he gave you roses. And he gave you flowers. And you grieve.
Children don't grieve like this. They don't know how to cry like this. You have to be older
And
to
you
learn
have
how to.
be older.
And that's why children don't get over things. Because when you're a woman, you can cry and cry and cry until a man is really buried. And you can go to his grave and he will be dead. But when you're a child and you can't sob.
And when you're a child, you can get over things. But when you're a child and you loved as a woman,
There's no end to it because you can't grieve.
you cannot grieve.
Only
You have to be a woman to grieve.
Only the grown can grieve.
And only the grown can grieve. And you were a child and you loved as a woman.
I didn't know how to grieve as a woman.
And now you can grieve as a woman. And you grieve between the rows of the peas.
I'm seeing a lot of things at the same time. In the garden between the rows of peas, there was my wedding bed. And the snow must fall on it to make the bed. And in my room at home now, I've seen these women by their bed, and the bed is not empty. There's a little girl lying in it, and she takes a she'll love the little girl. And maybe puts the little gray-stuffed apple there. And I'm seeing also his grave is not really where his grave is, but it's on the little island that was in the middle of the lake, and it seems like it's sort of floating out a bit. And that's what has to happen. As I cry and cry, the snow has to come and cover the garden, and the grave has to float out on the lake.
And the snow has to cover the garden. And that garden was your wedding bed. And
That's not right!
And it's not right. And the snow has to cover the rows of peas. And it's not
And
right.
kill the flowers.
And kill the flowers. And kill the flowers. And what flowers does the snow have to kill?
Winter kills them all.
The winter kills them all.
Little girls are supposed to think of gardens and Peter Rabbit and carrots and things like that. And they're not supposed to have to bear all this and to learn these things too quickly. But that's the way it happened. And there are seeds. When it snows, there's seeds underneath the snow, and some of them will come up and some of them won't, and that's the way the snows do it. And rose cane some die back and some don't, and that's the way the snows do it.
And that's the way the snows do it. And what do snows do to a grave that's floated out to an island on a lake, and a grave covered by a shroud, written and drawn in blood, Jeese, oh Jeese. Jeese, oh Jeese.
I don't care how many snows come. It can never be erased. It can never...
And it can never be erased.
I started to do this the same old way, to send the island out into the middle of the lake and have it disappear, to become amnesic for the experience, to cover the grave with snow, to repress the experience entirely. Didn't work the first time. Why should I do it the second time? So I make sure that the snows come and go, which allows me to remember and to turn my attention to other things, and to remember and to turn my attention to other things, to grieve and to live. Much better this way.
And what can a snow do to a grave and a shroud?
It comes and it melts and it comes and it melts. It doesn't erase it or take it away. It shouldn't.
And it shouldn't.
I know what it should. The snow should never erase the words of the tombstone or the shroud. They should stay bright with blood forever. But it should be all right to have some seeds grow next to it, so there could be both the blood and the flowers together on the grave.
Blood and the flowers together on the grave, and the snow.
The flowers that he gave me, but seeds for other flowers.
But seeds.
For me to give to other men.
And seeds from other flowers, but not Jesse's flower seeds.
Mine.
Those seeds have to die under the snows. And what flower seeds could be Jeannie's seeds? What would the first flower seed that would be Jeannie's seed next to the grave and next to the words written in blood? And what seed would Jeannie's flower be?
I've never had flowers to give to a man, so I would have to find flowers that a man would take. The first flowers that come up are crocus, and that's not a right flower to give a man.
And the first flower is not a right flower.
You don't give the first flowers of springtime to a man. You do not. You do not. It is not right.
And you don't give the first flower of spring to a man. And you don't give the first flower in the rose of peace. It's not right. But she had to, and she loved as a woman. And what flower could come after crocuses?
We skip over all the lilacs and all the daffodils and things because those are gone now. We'll pick a flower that comes later in the summer. When the snows come again, asters or dahlias or something that blooms then. And it's not as showy, but it's pure. It's not been touched by a man.
And it comes later in the summer.
Yeah.
What the metaphors represent in that last part is my struggle to free my relationships from men from the shadow of Jeese. I've noticed that all the men I'm attracted to have the same body type. They're all 5'10" and lean and wiry like he was. I imagine he had a nervous, driven, obsessive energy because that's what the men I'm attracted to have. What I'd like to do is to sort all that stuff out and free myself to choose from the whole range of men that there are in the world so that my choice is free and my own rather than determined by what he was.
Now that Jeannie knows her name, Jeannie can wait to choose the right flower.
For the right man, for a change.
The right man for a change. And
what about the sleeping little girl?
And what do you do when a little girl is sleeping?
She can't stay there because there might be things a little girl shouldn't need to see until she's grown.
And she can't stay there. But when a little girl is sleeping in a bed, what can happen?
She needs to be picked up and carried to her own room and to have a different bed.
And
because never, never will I say I don't have, this did not happen to me. Never will I say that. There will always be a little girl somewhere, but never will I say I had no child or I was no child. She's not my child. I've had my child and my children, they've grown and once when I was lying with somebody I had no business to, I got pregnant and I lost the baby. I had an abortion and I always thought it was a little boy. Maybe it wasn't. I used to dream I was walking down the streets and looking for him, and I would catch a glimpse of him, and each year he'd be a year older, but maybe this is something like that, maybe that
and would
each night she could sleep and get a year older and then be the same age as the woman and then be the woman.
And each night she could sleep and get a little older. And each night she could sleep in her bed. Or would she sleep in your bed?
She could start in my bed, but I would always take her to her bed so she wouldn't see things that she shouldn't see until they were hers.
And she would know and you would know at just the right age that she would be able to see things that she could share with you.
Well, I know that there are some things that are for a person to decide, and that's not my business, so. But it's not her having her whole life, her own life, that concerns me. That's easy. It's that as she lives, and that if she grows a year a night, soon, not too far away, she'll be my age, and then we can step into each other like sisters stepping sideways like into a mirror. And then I won't have to be split apart, but I won't have to get rid of part of me.
And you could have all the parts of
you. Yeah. And the memories, and the caring, and the everything, and the tears, and the seeds, and the everything. And that feels right.
And that feels right.
Because Because then I can both remember and live.
And you can remember and live. And you have both parts. And you don't have to remember with blood out your eyes. And you don't have to remember with black in your chest. But you can live and remember. And you can live in your eyes. And you can live in your chest. And you can live and remember with your heart. And you can live and remember with your whole body,
right,
like a woman. And you loved like a woman. And now you can live and you can remember like a woman. And you don't have to love like a woman and be a little girl. But she can grow up like a sister, and into one night you can step beside and into each other. And then you can live
as one.
And you can love. And you can remember as one.
And you know, David, there's still always room for another animal in the house.
And there's still always room for another animal. And she might like that animal while she's growing up night after night. And it's much more interesting to have a furry animal than it is to have been furred.
Like an animal.
Like an
treated like an animal.
And treated like an animal. And an animal can just lick your face. And you can hold an animal with both hands. And that's just the right animal. When there's always room for one more animal in your house. Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
There's a peaceful center, a happiness through the tears. Yeah.
So now you know how to grieve as a woman.
Oh, I knew that before, yeah. But this is different.
This is
something that I never thought I could grieve about.
And you can grieve
properly
about a little girl's woman.
And a poor crippled man.
And a poor crippled man.
Yeah.
And a poor crippled man.
Yeah.
And you can still love and remember a poor crippled man, but you love and remember him as a woman.
Yeah.
Because a little girl's love is written on the grave in blood for eternity.
Yeah.
And what interesting flowers that Jeannie can plant that are Jeannie's flowers beside his grave. And Jesse's flowers are no longer. But Jeannie's flowers are yet to be. So it's been 10 months since that interview. And what things would you like to say about that?
Well, the first thing that happened was I had this burst of manic teenage energy, and I was running around like a mad woman, starting projects and doing things, and giddy and in love with life and in love with my own unconscious. And bit by bit that wore off. You know, as I integrated the material in,
I came back to a more normal state. And I think that's pretty expectable, pretty normal.
That's a fairly normal characteristic. Very often you find that after a process with metaphors, a client will experience mood swings, and they'll get a polarity response from elation to depression, and often the periodicity can be something like hours or a day, but usually very short period swings back and forth, and then gradually it plateaus out.
Right, yeah. Yeah. What I experience more is a freeing of energy when I integrate something that has been unconscious. And then when I've almost got the job done, my symptoms worsen. It's like I tighten up and clench myself and brace myself for another journey back into the unconscious. And it happens over and over again. I'm beginning to get used to it. So I can't say that I was cured by this intervention. I mean, I'm not totally mentally healthy. I'm not, I'm not a miracle woman from it. But boy, did I get a lot of material. And it's fortified me, too, to go back and get the next piece. It's helped me get through flashbacks that have started happening, helped me done some really good regressive work in therapy. I really like what's happened.
I think that one of the places that metaphors can facilitate and be adjunctive to normal therapeutic interventions is that they give a substrate upon which you can do further work, whether it be cognitive or gestalt work, or whether it be analytical in nature, that the metaphors provide such rich veins of information. And I think it's, after an intervention like this, I'm not sure I'd want to do any more metaphor work for a little while, but explore more cognitive in the here and now some of the ramifications of the experience, and then perhaps later on, when other metaphors show, then do another piece.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. It gave me about 6 months material to work on in therapy. As far as myself professionally, I didn't carry that much over directly. I think I feel freer, I feel more centered in my own work, more confident. I'm much less scared when clients show very intense reactions, because I know on a different level that that's where the healing occurs. And so I'm more concerned in putting out a safe environment, a nurturing environment, a respectful environment. And if the regressions occur and the intense feelings come up, that's fine. That's to be celebrated, not to be deplored.
And you work yourself with children and teenagers who have been abused. How do you think this has helped in your understanding and your own clinical experience?
Okay, I work more with adults, and it's helped me follow them. It's helped me follow the kinds of ways in which they express their material. I'm just beginning to branch out into working with kids. I've been reluctant to do that yet, so I'm not sure how it's going to affect it. I'm sure it will. I haven't used this technique that much, and I've stayed away from using it with incest survivors because I think it's too close to my own experience. I have used it with some other people with different issues, and I've been fascinated by the interplay of a personality type with what happens to the metaphors, but that's a whole other story.
Okay.
I think that's an area that is going to provide a lot of enjoyment and a lot of learning, but that's out in the future for now.
So it took quite a lot of courage for you to, first of all, come up and participate in the original experience, and then certainly over these past 9 months in which you've produced some of the drawings and the photographs. Has that been useful in terms of revisiting your history?
Yeah, it's been very personally rewarding, and frankly, it's also been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I had the opportunity. And I thank you.
And thank you for your courage.
Thanks.